finish up these slides on computer science and other disciplines outside of just, making turtles do cool stuff. We talked about social science and art, medicine, and like harder sciences like biology, chemistry, physics maybe. I would like to now have the privilege or the honor of talking to you about computer science and finance, because there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's fun to talk about, and we get to learn about a little bit of cryptocurrency, because why not? It's relevant. So let's talk about cryptocurrency, though it is, I think, finally starting to not be as popular, which is maybe a good thing, who knows. But yeah, let's talk about Bitcoin, because that's still the most popular one. You got Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? Bitcoin is definitely the original one, definitely the one that people still want. But I guess the price is going down. It's fluctuating in a weird way. But yeah, here is Bitcoin. What in the world is Bitcoin if we've never heard too much about it? It's, of course, the most popular cryptocurrency. It is money that is virtual. And there is a lot to explain, and so I'm just going to keep it all at a high level. We can go down into a deeper level if you have any questions about anything or want to discuss further. There's definitely a rabbit hole here that we could go down. But yeah, just cryptocurrency in general. It's money. It's a way to spend something and like to own something and have nobody else own your stuff. It's money, and you can spend it, and it is completely electronic. It uses encryption, in fact, to make sure that your money is your own. Nobody can take stuff out of your account, and also to make it so that nobody has any way to link back your cryptocurrency account to your name unless you cash out or something, which is interesting. So you got the concepts of like RSA encryption. Remember that? That's keeping your cryptocurrency wallet safe. And the idea is that everybody has a little account number, and it's just a number. Like I have an account for me, but nobody knows it's me. There's just a number associated with it that's essentially an encryption number, some secret key. And so I can have some money, some dollar signs in my account, and nobody can touch them unless I try to spend them. I have to use my other key, my private key to spend things. And so like there can be another account. Let's say my cat has an account and he has some money. And, of course, his account is associated with another address. And so to spend money in Bitcoin, you just send money to that other number that represents the person you want to send it to. And so all you need is a number. You don't have to know who it is, and nobody can track it as long as it all stays as Bitcoin. So like I say, I can tell Bitcoin to send my $1 sign over to my cat, and now he has 2 and I have 1. That's essentially what's going on. And there's powerful encryption techniques to make sure that it's only me who can spend my money. And there's some cool algorithms involved that make sure that I can't like duplicate any money or steal it from somebody else. It's really cool. So yeah, it was made back in 2009 is when it first came out by a person named, there's like a research paper that came out by a person named Satoshi Nakamoto, and that is nobody's real name. This was a pseudonym, and so even the person who created Bitcoin is still, we're not still sure who that was, which is surprising and interesting. So it's very anonymous. And yeah, the whole point usually of a cryptocurrency is that it's hard to track, so you can't really pay taxes on Bitcoin unless you declare that you have them, and nobody can trace your account back to you unless you like cash out for dollars or something, which is interesting. So it's very hard to track. Good for nefarious purposes for that reason. That's one of the first uses of Bitcoin, was for like buying drugs or something. But nowadays it's very widespread, and people like to trade it like it was stocks. So that's Bitcoin in a nutshell. Every account has, it's called a wallet, and they're all associated with a number. Every wallet is equivalent to a number, which we call an address. So yeah, that's the first slide on Bitcoin. Any questions about any of that? Any rabbit holes we want to go down? All right. So yeah, let's keep on trucking there. Bitcoin is on top of it's created on top of this place called the blockchain, And let's talk about that. So what Bitcoin is it's a network. It's a bunch of computers connected together, working together to power this thing called the blockchain. And essentially what it is just a bunch of computers talking to each other. Like here's my laptop. I can run a Bitcoin. I can connect to Bitcoin there, and I can connect to the entire network, which is just a bunch of servers everywhere across the internet, and they're all talking to each other, exchanging information. So there's ways for them to get access to each other and figure stuff out about themselves. And so it's all these computers connected together. It's powered by encryption. So the account number of a user is their public key, which they're able to share with everybody. Remember that in RSA. And to spend their own money, they have to have a private key, which they keep for themselves. And that allows them to mark that, yes, I really do want to initiate this transaction. I really am me. So, yeah, that's the idea. So every account, maybe my account exists, Lawton's account, and I have some Bitcoin. I can't spend that. I can't give it to the network unless I unlock my account with my private key. All right? And that's essentially what's going on. So it's a peer-to-peer network, uses encryption to talk to everybody. Your address, your wallet number, that's your public key. Share that with everyone. And then you keep your private key safe, and that's what allows you to verify and say, yes, I really do mean to have this transaction go forward. All right. And the way Bitcoin works, the way that nobody can cheat it, is that everybody on this network keeps a huge file of every single transaction in order that ever happened on the Bitcoin network. And that's called the blockchain. So every computer has a copy of this file that contains every single transaction, like Lawton spent this, Lawton's cat spent this and sent it to this address. Every single transaction ever. Everybody has a copy of that blockchain. And they're all working to agree on the copy as well as the additions to it when people want to spend new money. All right? So that's what the blockchain is. It's just a big file that holds every single transaction that took place. Yes?
How big is the file?
I haven't looked into that. There are ways to compress it, and some people you only really need to store the end of it on most computers, but I'm thinking it's pretty large. Might take a hard drive or two to fill up completely. That's a good question. Yeah, I'm not sure. Definitely, we can look into that. Or why not? Let's search for it. What is the size of the blockchain? What is the size of Bitcoin blockchain? All right, that's not too bad. 15 gigabytes. Just holds this account got this thing and this much, things like that. So it's apparently 15 gigabytes. Yeah, that is surprising. But I guess it's just a bunch of numbers. You can compress those. Good to know. Good question. Yeah, so that happened. That's the thing. That's the blockchain. And that's how you know how much everybody's account has. If you just read through the entire blockchain, replay it, simulate it, you'll know whose account has what, because you'll know how the money got moved around. And everybody on the network has their own copy, and they all have to agree, and that's how they make sure no stealing takes place, no weird things happen. All right, so when somebody wants to spend their money, like I say I want to spend my money, I unlock my account with my private key, I send my transaction into the network, and everybody has to agree. I can't just start writing to my blockchain saying I got 1 million Bitcoins, because nobody's going to agree with that. It all has to be encrypted and signed, and it all works out. So everybody's got a bunch of numbers, and that's keeping this agreement process in check. All right? That's the idea. So everybody has a list of all those transactions, and every time there's a new one, it gets written to the end. And everybody has to agree, though. That's important. All right. So yeah, any questions about that? All right. So there is a way to break Bitcoin. Unfortunately, if you're a bad person you would say that your account, like you'd write to your copy of the blockchain saying that my account gets 1,000 Bitcoins. And you could try that, but it's not really going to work out, luckily. So like this is what the network looks like. If you write something silly to your own blockchain, nobody else is going to agree with you, which is, I guess, a good thing. So like you say in your blockchain out here, I get 1 million Bitcoins, nobody else agrees. So that's how that works. So majority wins. As long as the majority of the network thinks you're silly, they're not going to let that transaction go forward. But if you suddenly have control over at least 50%, slightly more, I guess, of the computers on that network, then you suddenly have taken over. Like maybe you control this many computers. That's not enough because that's not the majority. If you control over half of the Bitcoin network, first of all, that would take a lot of computers, some serious power. Only like nations could even think of doing that. But if you had enough computing power, like you could take over half, like half of the network, and you write to all of their blockchains that something happened, everybody else is going to agree because majority wins. So like taking over this much is not enough, but taking over this much is enough. And so if you had enough computing power, you can make Bitcoin useless because then you are the majority. Everything you say goes, which is interesting. And sadly, several alternative Bitcoins called altcoins, which have been made but never have been as cool as Bitcoin, maybe you've heard of some of them have sadly been subjected to this fate where not a lot of people are on that alternate network. You can take over at least half of it, start writing to their version of the blockchain, and sadly, money is useless at that point. So that's why Bitcoin is still working, because it's popular. Because it's popular, nobody has control over at least half of the network, which is nice. Okay, any questions about any of that? Let's now talk about mining. What is that? I'm sure you've heard of it. So on Bitcoin, like it takes a lot of computing power to be on this network, to have your computer connected to the internet. Like you're taking up a lot of traffic to download new transactions. You're like you have to keep your computer on, pay a lot of energy costs. You have to verify transactions. That's computing power. And so why would anybody want to be on the network in that case? It costs money, essentially. It costs power and time. And so as an incentive, this is a nice thing about Bitcoin, as an incentive to keep people on the network so that like there's always enough and nobody can like take it over and like hold a copy of the blockchain on their precious 15 gigabytes of space, then there is, every time a transaction gets written, or a group of them, there is a little lottery process on the Bitcoin network. And every few transactions, they all get jumbled together, and then the fastest person who can verify those transactions in a certain way gets some Bitcoins. So Bitcoin gets generated, it gets minted out of thin air, like you're mining it out of the earth, I guess. And the lucky person who won that lottery, anybody gets a chance as long as you're fast enough, but the lucky person who wins that round gets some Bitcoins sent to them. And that's how they are incentivized to stay on the network. That's how mining works. And so it's essentially computers are solving some fancy math problems to verify transactions, and that will end up giving them Bitcoin in the end, which is fun. So this is essentially how money got printed. That's how money got made originally on the Bitcoin network. And that's how there is a supply of it. Like, it gets made because it's being mined by people, and then they're spending it. And so essentially what's going on with mining is there's a fancy math problem with every transaction. Like you have to do some fancy math, jumble all the transactions together that are about to be added, and then the math problem is generate a number based on those transactions that has a certain number of zeros at the front in a very interesting way. The rest can be anything, but that's essentially the hard math problem that gets sent to everybody, and the first person who can solve it gets some Bitcoin. That's how mining works. And yeah, they get a little bit. And over time, the Bitcoin network gives out less and less Bitcoin every transaction. So at the start of the network, like back in 2009, a lot of Bitcoin got given out. But over time, less and less gets given out to those lucky lottery winners. And that's just to like make it so that there's never going to be an infinite supply of Bitcoin to make the money still worth something. And one day the supply will hit zero. And so there will be no incentive to verify transactions in that way. There are some small transaction fees though that I guess would take over. But that's all mining is. It's just an incentive to verify these transactions. Any questions about any of that? Oh, excuse me. Let me blow my nose for a second. Every time. It's spring. All right, so let's keep on trucking. So I guess the main question is this okay? Like, why should we have cryptocurrency? Is that something I would like to give to people? Should it be out there in the world where people don't have to verify their transactions? Like they can just be a number and not a name, and nothing can get translated back to them. That might not be good. The first uses of Bitcoin, by the way, I guess the first person bought a pizza, which was cool. But then a lot of the other first uses of Bitcoin was like on a black market to buy drugs or something like that. And the reason that it may not be okay to have Bitcoin is that, like, if you're a government, you cannot track spending. You can't track who owns what. Everybody's just a number. The only time you can track something is when you actually cash out and exchange your Bitcoin for real dollars or something, because then somebody has to write something down with your name on it because it's being sent to a bank account at that point. But you can't track it if it just stays in the network. And another thing is it's essentially stocks or gambling, whatever you want to call it, because the price fluctuates so much. The exchange rate for Bitcoin has no guarantees because no government really, maybe a couple, nobody really wants to back it and give people confidence in it and make it like stable. So here is every semester I showed this slide to my students. I took a screenshot of the current Bitcoin price, and so it shot up pretty good. It's like a year and a half ago. It was like 66,000, and then it went down again, and now it's kind of like at 30-ish thousand. So this is the most recent one, 27,653. I took a screenshot last night. So it's just going all over the place, and so you probably don't want to like bet your life on it or something because maybe it's just going to keep going down. And so the question is this okay? And we can ask our boys to determine the answer. That's one way to do it. This is an ethical problem. Should we have cryptocurrency? So maybe Kant, if we asked him, he would say, well, we'd be asking him, like, should we always be allowed to have anonymous transactions? Should we be allowed to spend our money and only tell the people who we're giving it to anything about ourselves? Something like that. I don't know. But Kant, just in general, he was for individual rights. And so he would be a proponent, most likely, of cryptocurrency. He would be like, well, in a fair world, people would always naturally want to declare the things that they did to their equivalent of the IRS, and people would naturally pay their taxes and things like that. He likes to trust people, and so Kant would probably say yes to Bitcoin. Better, there's some more privacy when you want it, and you deserve it. So Kant would probably be a proponent of cryptocurrency. Mill could usually swing a utilitarian either way, depending on how you argue. If you're a government, for example, cryptocurrency is most likely a con for you. So, like, from a government's point of view, from like the U.S.'s point of view, crypto is unfortunate because like there's less tax money. There's like people aren't spending dollars; they're spending Bitcoin. We can't track that or tax it. There's a lot more illicit activity because of it. It's essentially like you're spending cash, and but there's no person in front of you who you're giving it to. It's just another number, and so it's very easy to hide your tracks when you're buying things. There's also a very large environmental cost This might have gone down because less people are on the network now, but back in its heyday, the story was that the amount of energy that the Bitcoin network was taking up and all the miners on it and things like that was the equivalent of the energy used by the country of Argentina. So that's a lot of energy just to be on the Bitcoin network. That's how much they were taking up. So that gives some issues for the environment, and so that's a con. Maybe that would dissuade you from wanting to use crypto, or saying that it's a good thing. But on the flip side, as a utilitarian, you'd weigh both sides. You could also argue that it's really good for your individual freedoms. Like you want some privacy from the people you're interacting with on the internet and like exchanging money with, and this is a great way to not be tracked. And so maybe it's a good thing, and that outweighs the bad issues that maybe a government might think of. So there's two sides to every coin, of course, and I just want you to think about it a little bit. So any questions, comments about any of that stuff? So yeah, Bitcoin is really just a big math problem for every transaction, and people are getting new money that way. That's how you mint money. So I like to have a silly little exercise, or I guess a competition every semester I teach about cryptocurrency. So let me introduce to all of you a new cryptocurrency named after, or with my cat as the mascot. It will be called Litcoin. And one Litcoin is worth not very much, but maybe if you mine enough of it, it will help you do well on a test or something. But you can mine a Litcoin, and I will make some physical Litcoins to give out to you for fun. You can mine a Litcoin by solving a math problem the fastest. And here are the rules. I am going to write 3 questions on the board. Here they are. Or let's use some markers. I'm going to write 3 questions on the slide, and the first person to write the answer correctly will be given a brand new, they will mint for themselves. They'll mine a Litcoin that way. So here are some markers. But do you understand what's about to happen? So the fastest person who can write the correct answer in the slot, I will give you a Litcoin. I will draw it for you. Okay? All right. So ready, set. Here are your 3 questions. I will mine your coins in the meantime. If you think that if there's an answer on the board for that question and it's not right, go and write next to it the right one. I need one more. Alright, is no one else playing or what? I'll give you a couple more minutes to mine your coins. But this is essentially what's going on inside of every computer. It's interesting. This is the fastest computer that can say the answer gets it. Nice. Alright. Thank you all for humoring me. This is a fun example of what really goes on inside of a computer. But let me do all this together now. Let me verify some answers. I think Prez's max temperature today in Celsius is apparently 28. That part's 28. And San Francisco's max temperature in Fahrenheit is 64. And 28 plus 64 is 92. Close enough. And the other ones I think I have in the notes. So thank you all for playing along. I appreciate it. Here are the answers. 25912, that looks right. I've got question 1. Nice. All right, what about question 2? That looks good as well. Very nice. Question 3, you can trade them with your peers and buy something nice. So thank you all for humoring me. That was fun. Any questions about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency? It's just computers solving math problems and agreeing on a blockchain. All right. So that's fun. Let us move on to a new set of slides then. Thank you all for that. So that is the end of computer science in other disciplines. Let's talk about a fun concept that is both mathematical as well as computer science-y. It's called game theory. This is in a lot of different fields. They use game theory, and so I want to teach you a little bit of it. And it will be fun. So there's some cool new concepts. It's just whatever you do, whatever field you're in, you can usually apply game theory to it, and it's got a cool name, and so let's talk about it. At least a little bit. We won't finish these slides today, though. So yeah, let's talk about game theory. And here's a fun, silly example to explain it. So let's say that, I don't know, this is Fresno. So we have 2 corn producers, 2 people who are growing corn on their farms, and they also have little roadside stands where they sell their corn. And the question is, what price should those 2 corn producers sell their corn at? And this is just kind of common sense, I think. That's what game theory is, very much rooted in common sense. But we're mathematically specifying that common sense. And so, for example, if, I don't know, here's corn producer A and their corn stand. Here's corn producer B and their corn stand. If producer A is selling their corn at like $50 for each ear, and then producer B is selling their corn at $5 per each ear. There's no such thing really as designer corn. So everybody's going to go and buy their corn from person B, right? They're going to go to the cheaper one, and that's how it's going to work. And so game theory is just essentially the study of this common sense idea, and it's going to tell us that the prices are going to go down. Game theory is going to tell you how the prices will be driven down for that same product from the more expensive producer. So if this person ever wants to compete, they have to change their price to $5 to stay in business. That's essentially it. And so then they are both going to sell at the same price, and that's called an equilibrium. That's important because that's essentially what's going to eventually happen once these two producers try hard enough. The only way that an equilibrium does not happen is if you do something illegal, like the two sellers, they collude, and so they both decide, I'm going to sell my corn for $50 and so are you, and we're just going to both keep the prices high for everyone. That is not legal, but technically a possibility. But outside the realm of that, the prices are going to get driven down, and that's something that game theory can tell us. Game theory was invented by a very brilliant man named John Nash. An entire movie was made about him. It's a cool movie if you haven't seen it. It's called A Beautiful Mind. I encourage you to watch it. And yeah, let's talk about game theory for a few slides, and that will be all that I wanted to say. So game theory is so generic, so general. So I should define what it means to be a game in game theory, because it's not like a board game or something, or a video game. It's just a general thing. So a game in game theory is defined to be a strategic interaction between individuals in situations. That could be anything, right? That could be me driving to work or something. I'm interacting with other cars. So anything could be a game. It's very vague, and that means it can tell you things about a lot of different, like, potentially weird things that are like driving to work, things that are like really playing a video game or something. So it can handle a lot of different concepts, but the two key pieces are individuals are playing this game, whatever it is, and they're interacting in different situations that you can talk about. So those are the two main concepts. And a game can be either a cooperative one or a non-cooperative one. So a cooperative game is usually what you think of as like a board game or usually a video game. A cooperative game that you play with people, I guess, is one where people are better off working together. Like you can get a better score if you work together in whatever game you're talking about. So like we're better off not crashing into each other as we're driving to work, right? Or to school. That is a cooperative game, being on the road. Same with like playing a board game with teams. And so forming a group or an alliance, it's a good thing to do in a cooperative game, right? So that's what a cooperative game is. The flip side of that is a non-cooperative game. That is when you cannot form an alliance with anybody else, or like it's a very, very bad idea. Things will not end well for you if you form an alliance. The only reason in a non-cooperative game that you might end up working with another entity is that like you feel threatened in some way. That's what the definition says. So that's kind of funny. So cooperative game, alliance is good. Non-cooperative game, alliance is bad. You're worse off working with other people, which is interesting. And so yeah, cooperative game theory, there's a bunch of different branches, and they're both centered around these ideas. So cooperative game theory is about studying what it means, mathematically specifying what it means to be fairness. And non-cooperative game theory is about like how can you win? How can you mathematically specify how to win your game, this generic thing, okay? So it's very vague, can talk about anything, and that's why it's used everywhere. Game theory is used in economics, political science, to study things, to study how people act, how they spend their money, how they vote, biology, how organisms grow and evolve, philosophy, or if you're just a corn producer, you can use game theory as well. So everything you can study under the lens of game theory, and so it's a fun topic, because it doesn't matter your major. We can talk about it, and it will apply to you. And yeah, people end up linking this back to computer science at least, people end up like writing simulations a lot of the time. Like people spend a whole lot of money and they write tons of programs to solve for the optimal strategy in whatever game they have. And maybe the game is the stock market, things like that, when to buy a good. So that's the idea. That's where I'm going. Are there any questions about anything so far? So game theory is a very generic framework to view ideas in. It tells you how to play it when you study the game. All right. So I think the last thing that I want to talk about today, it'll take a few slides to get through, is I want to talk about this concept called the prisoner's dilemma. Has anybody heard of that before? It's a very standard game theory concept, and it's going to be a very important one. It's going to help us learn a bunch of different concepts about equilibriums and things. So this is a non-cooperative game, by the way. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. You cannot form alliances, but here's the setup. Here's the story. So two prisoners, they were caught together, they did something bad, or at least they claim, like the cops claim that they did something bad, and they are put into two separate interrogation rooms. So these people, they were caught together, supposedly accomplices. They're put into two separate interrogation rooms. They cannot talk to one another. And they're given 4 options, all right? Well, they're given one option. They can either confess to the crime or not confess to the crime. There's only... I guess there's no real evidence against them, but if they confess, they're of course going to go to jail. And so here is the 4 options, because person A, the first prisoner, could either confess or not confess, and prisoner B, the other person in the other room, they could also confess or not confess. And here are the outcomes they're told what will happen depending on who confesses and who does not. So we can make a grid of this. So if prisoner A confesses and prisoner B does not confess, then they're actually going to let prisoner A go free. Prisoner A confesses to the whole crime. They both did it. That person gets to walk out for free, but the person who did not confess in the other room will be sent to jail for 10 years. All right? So if prisoner A confesses, but B does not, prisoner A is walking free, prisoner B gets 10 years. The flip side works too. If prisoner A doesn't confess, but prisoner B does, then prisoner B walks out, but prisoner A gets the 10 years. Outcome 3, if they both end up confessing, then they both get 5 years, which is not as bad. And then finally, in the last outcome, this is essentially what the prisoners would like, right? If neither of them confess, they don't have enough evidence, then they both get to walk out for free, 0 years in prison, right? So the question, and game theory will tell us the answer, is what should these prisoners do? What is the optimal outcome for them? So here's a grid of the options. Prisoner A and prisoner B. So you got 4 options total, right? Prisoner A could either confess, I'll say C for confess, or not confess, and C for not confess. And same with prisoner B. In their separate interrogation room, prisoner B could either confess or not confess. And here is what happens in all of those cases. If they both confess, then they both get 5 years in jail. A, B, they both get 5. All right. If prisoner A does not confess, but prisoner B does, then prisoner B walks free. They get 0 years, and prisoner A gets 10 years, unfortunately. Same with the flip side. If prisoner A confesses, they get 0 years, and the person that doesn't confess, if prisoner B did not confess, they get 10 years. And then finally, if they both don't confess, if they just keep their mouths shut, there's nothing to go on, and they both get to walk out for free with 0 years in prison, right? So the question is, what is the optimal outcome? What should these prisoners do? And I guess take your bets now. Like, what's the thing that the prisoners should do? What should they do right now? Think about that in your mind, and then I'll show you how to discover what should happen. This is a non-cooperative game, by the way. These prisoners are in 2 different rooms. They can't talk to each other. They just have to do what's best for them. They cannot exchange information. And so this person who invented game theory, John Nash, he came up with this idea called the Nash equilibrium, which is going to be a optimal solution to this non-cooperative prisoner's dilemma game. All right, and so let's talk about what a Nash equilibrium is. Again, it's a very wordy definition. It's a little generic, but that's okay. So what is a Nash equilibrium? It's a set of strategies, one for each player, like it's a way to play the game, that has the property that each player's choice is their best response to the choices of the other players. All right, so like my decision is the best decision regardless of what this other person could do. That's essentially what a Nash equilibrium is. It's the best response to the choices of the other players, which I have no control over. Okay? And so, bringing this back to our example, the key idea in the way that we're going to discover the Nash equilibrium is that prisoner A, just think about it from their point of view, they have no clue what prisoner B is doing in the other cell, in the other interrogation room. They have no clue. And so they're kind of forced to play it safe, right? Because if they get ratted out and they don't confess, like they're getting the 10 years and B's walking out free. You see that? So you kind of have to play it safe if you're a prisoner here, and that's the common sense answer. And a Nash equilibrium is the mathematical specification of how to play it safe. All right, that's interesting. And so another way to explain what a Nash equilibrium is, if that's not enough, is, here's a good quote that I found on the internet. It's, a Nash equilibrium is a law that nobody would want to break, even if there was no punishment for breaking it. It's like, it's what you would want to do, regardless of what anybody else would do. It's like, you're playing it safe. So a good example of a Nash equilibrium is, like, everybody obeys stoplights. Everybody wants to obey a stoplight and stop when it's red, right? Why? We all stop at stoplights, most likely, right? And if you think about it, you're not really going to, most of the time, ever get in trouble for running a red light, are you? Like, there's not usually a cop at every intersection. You can just blow past every red light if you really wanted to. But we don't. Why? Because what's that? There could be cameras, but let's pretend there are no cameras, even. Like, you're not going to get caught. Yeah, it's the danger. It's like you value your life, right? It's everybody obeys stoplights because they would like to get to their destination in one piece. And so this is a self-enforcing law. It's a Nash equilibrium. It's one, even if I'm not going to get caught, I'm not going to run this light because I'll probably get hit. I have no control over what the other person can do. Driving is a non-cooperative game, right? We can't trust any other players. That is what a Nash equilibrium is all about. Nice. So, yeah, for the prisoners, the goal to figure out the Nash equilibrium is to consider what the average sentence is going to be for every possibility. Think about it from one of the prisoner's point of view. It's going to end up being symmetric. I'll show you that. I'll make a nice little drawing. But you would think, right? You would think that the best thing to do is for neither of the prisoners to confess, right? That's obviously the best outcome for both of them. But it's not going to be the Nash equilibrium because they have no control over the other person and they have to play it safe. Okay? So let's mathematically specify what that means to play it safe. So here's my grid. Let me copy and paste that. Here's how you discover the Nash equilibrium. Here's the math. So let's think about this from the perspective of prisoner A. It's equivalent if you think about it from the perspective of prisoner B. But what are prisoner A's options, right? Prisoner A. Their options are, like, they could either confess. If they confess, something happens. If they confess, what are the options? What are the possibilities? What could happen? And if they don't confess, what are the possibilities? If they don't confess. And so the math here, let me move this up a little bit. It's very interesting. It's going to make it obvious why they should both do something. Like, here is prisoner A's options. Like, if prisoner A confesses, he has no control over prisoner B, so here are the options that he gets. And then if prisoner A does not confess, again, no control over what prisoner B does, here are the two options that he could be in. Yeah. So if prisoner A confesses, let's calculate the average time in jail, depending on all the options. Average time in jail, in prison. So if prisoner A confesses, here's what they get. they get either 5 years in prison if prisoner B also confesses, or if prisoner B does not confess, they get to walk out and they get 0 years. So on average, we have no control over what prisoner B can do. On average, we get 5 plus 0 over 2 years in prison, which is 2.5. See that? If prisoner A does not confess, then they're forced into one of these options, right? Either prisoner B did confess, unfortunately, and they end up with 10 years in prison, or if prisoner B kept their mouth shut, then they both get to walk out free and they get 0, and prisoner A gets 0 years. And so what's the average time spent in jail if they did not confess? It's going to be 10 plus 0 over 2, which is 5. See that? And so the Nash equilibrium, it's kind of obvious now because we have no control over what prisoner B is going to do. We better play it safe and take the best option for us regardless. Because if I confess, I'm going to get at most 5 years. And that's the best option. And actually, the same is true for prisoner B. So they're both going to want to confess. That is the Nash equilibrium, and that's why they should both confess. Because the alternative is much, much worse. If they could trust each other, I guess it would all work out. But this is a non-cooperative game, of course, and they cannot trust each other. So that's why they're going to end up both confessing, and that makes the most sense. It may seem paradoxical. Like, why can't they just both not confess? But it's because it's a non-cooperative game. They can't trust each other. And game theory tells us exactly why they should both confess to minimize their amount of time in jail. So that's our intro to game theory. Any questions about that? Fun little example, I think, if we haven't seen it before. Even if we have. So that is how you weigh your options. That's how you can mathematically figure out how to do something, how to play a game for some definition of game. So yeah, that's fun to think about, and we'll come back to this. But that is, I think, where I would like to stop for the day. Let's see here. So yeah, no new assignments this week. I think most of them are already all out. So yeah, just the lecture today. I'll talk about your final on Wednesday. Okay? So the rest of the time is yours to work and to ask questions.